Welcome back for another Friday night in by the fire. We're happy you found us again, and we have some kind of a story for you tonight. I'd mix a stiff one, or roll a big old joint and pour yourself a nice warm cup of chai. If you got kids, this might be the time to tune out, or tune in. This is the TOT LOT. Everything about that morning was new. New house, new neighborhood, new lives. My husband, Phil, moved us across the country, tethered to a promotion. I was indifferent to the move. All my work was online, and I never really cared for the house we were in. It was our fourth choice when we were looking, and we both had non-verbally agreed it was an in-betweener. Our friends were all starting to dwindle, and our families were scattered all over the place. Jake was our only anchor. Jake had just turned 3. He was bright and beautiful. He played with blocks and balls and rocks and sticks. Anything he could bounce or build or throw. He was the type of kid who could do no wrong, because there was no wrong. It felt like the sun was warming you when he smiled. It was the first morning in the new house after Phil went to work when we decided to explore the neighborhood. I had a pretty good idea of the area. I looked up and overhead online, and it was mostly row houses and doubles, a co-op, a strip mall nearby, and a ravine. Jake loved the idea of the ravine, because the one near our old place was like a jungle of barbed wire. So we set off to find it, Jake whistling the whole walk there. Whistling was something Phil taught him to do. Jake could only do 2 notes, but he did them well. He had gaps between his front teeth, so when he cried, he discovered that piercingly high pitch. Phil explained it further, and then we had a walking tornado siren for a child. More than once, I've panicked, thinking I'd left a tea kettle boiling in the kitchen. But it was always Jake. Sometimes, when he slept, he'd exhale and I'd hear the whistle through his teeth. It was so cute and just made me love him more. The whistling died down as we approached the ravine. What a letdown. More of a small stream at the bottom of a hill. Jake barely gave it a second look. We continued on, moving through the neighborhood, which was also equally boring. Poor Jake. He'd have nowhere to explore. We'll get him on a bike as soon as we can. Well, not too soon. We crossed the street and into a co-op. As we were passing a row of old townhomes, we saw something to highlight the walk. Down a narrow pathway, tucked away in a nook, there was a small courtyard with a playground in the middle. Jake's eyes lit up. He locked onto the main attraction, which was a half-dilapidated play structure pirate ship. The paint had worn off. The charm had worn off. Everything had worn off. It was truly a piece of shit. But Jake took off at it like it was what he'd been looking for his whole life. Boys, if you show them a tree with a low enough branch, they'll try to climb it. Within no time, he was up at the helm, steering the ship like it was Noah's Ark. I walked over and sat on the far benches. I could look out to the pathway and the street from here while watching Jake. He loved this place, and it was beautiful seeing him so happy. But then I started to notice the walls of the courtyard. They all went up about 8 floors and were filled with windows that were broken or boarded up. I could hear music playing from one of them, a dog barking from another, occasional yelling, arguing. Then there was a swing set without any swings. It was just a frame. Whatever, I thought, and pulled out my cell. I scanned through some texts and emails. Jake yelled for me to take his picture. I did, but as I saw someone out on the street. A woman, middle-aged, with dark hair. She looked tired, worn out. The kind you get when all you do is drink. I know the look. The woman stared in at us. At Jake. My stomach went sour. Please don't come in here, lady. But just as the thought entered my head, she was walking down the path and into the courtyard. Oh no, I tensed up. Why would she be coming in here? I kept my cell out, pretending to text, but eyeing the woman. She sat down on the opposite side of the play structure. I couldn't see her from my bench, so I shifted over to the edge, and there she was, staring up at Jake, her lips pulled back in what appeared to be a smile. She was happy watching Jake enjoy himself. So why was my stomach so uneasy? Why couldn't I sit still? It was her odd smile that didn't look right, and I think she was giggling quietly to herself. Was she mentally ill? A drug addict? She didn't look poor or strung out. Her bag and jacket had money behind them. What was up with her? I started to get uncomfortable and put my cell away. My mind took off, and before I knew it, I was playing out scenarios in my head where the woman started to approach Jake, talked to him, climbed up onto the ship with him, held his hand. What point would I step in? What point should I? How long would it take to run to him? Then she stood up. My nails dug into my palms. Shit, what do I have on me? My keys. I've got keys. That's about as dangerous as my purse is getting. Shit, I wish Phil was here. He'd already be up there playing with Jake. Then the woman turned, and now I could see her face better. I felt the world go cold. It wasn't a smile. Her lips were pulled back, but I hadn't seen them curve down at the corners. She wasn't laughing. She was crying. That hopeless, sad whine you only let out when you're truly lost. It was directed at Jake, then it turned to me. I only held eyes with the woman for a moment, but it hit me deep in my soul. She wasn't me, but I could see her sadness in myself somehow. Then the woman walked away from the bench, out the courtyard, and onto the narrow path leading to the street. I tried not to watch, pretending it didn't matter, that this was okay, but I kept watching. She never turned around. She left the path, and then it was just Jake and I. I breathed a sigh of relief. My blood ran warm again, and I turned my attention back to Jake. That's when I saw something else. I wasn't sure what it was at first. I'm still not, but it looked like the silhouette of a boy. It was shaded in like a shadow, but you could see through it. I blinked, but it was still there, standing on the other side of the ship, facing Jake. Jake's back was turned. He was at the bow, pretending to be directing the ship through stormy seas. I tried to call his name, but my voice cracked and died. He didn't hear me, but the silhouette did. It shifted, facing me now. I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. The silhouette was definitely the shape of a boy, a little taller than mine. It turned back to Jake and moved towards him. My body felt like a bag of wet salt. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I could only watch that silhouette shift across the structure towards my unknowing son, innocent and precious. It stood behind Jake, reaching up his back. Suddenly, anger replaced fear, boiling over inside me. I found my voice. I've never yelled so loud, and I didn't care. The courtyard shook from the echo. I was climbing the structure and pulling Jake down before I knew what I was doing. It wasn't until we were at the carriage that I looked back. The structure was empty. There was no sign of it now. Was there before? My eyes scanned the courtyard. I did a full 360-degree spin, but we were alone now. Jake was upset. Me freaking out always caused him to cry, so I apologized, made something up, and told him it was time to head back for lunch. As usual, Jake wanted to ride the carriage home. He was getting old and big for it and always wanted to walk places, but the way back was a different story. He'd crawl in and usually fall asleep in seconds, but this time was different. He was awake and whistling. I was starting to doubt I'd seen what I'd seen on the structure. Maybe that woman had thrown me off. Maybe I was just off in general. I just wanted to get us home. I checked back over my shoulder and saw the silhouette again, only for a moment before it darted behind a hedge. Was it following us? My pace quickened. Jake started to whistle louder. I checked again and swear I saw the silhouette disappeared behind a tree. I swear. Jake's whistle startled me and I yelled for him to stop. He started to cry and I sprinted, pushing the carriage all the way home. Before we turned up our walkway, I checked back over my shoulder. I wanted to make sure whatever was following us, if something was following us, didn't stalk us home. The street looked quiet and clear. No movement. It was just us. I got Jake inside and locked the door. For the rest of the morning, Jake was quiet. He could tell I was upset and kept to his toys. I opened a bottle of wine. It was early, but I needed a glass, just to ease the tension. Phil got home shortly after dusk, and he brought pizza back for dinner, Jake's favorite. By this point, I was finishing the bottle I opened and was feeling more at ease. What had I even been scared about? After dinner, Jake wanted to go for a walk. The thought pulled me back to the afternoon and my frantic sprint home. The wine courage evaporated. Phil had wanted to stretch his legs, so it was just me anchoring them. The sense that something had tried to follow Jake and I was back. I felt like we had just left the park. The night air was crisp. We saw a few other families out in the neighborhood, walking around. Everyone was very friendly here and it helped to put me at ease. Then Jake started whistling. My anxiety returned, my heart beating through my chest. Oh my God, I realized where we were. We were near the courtyard, right where I turned back and saw the silhouette this morning, where Jake stopped whistling. I wanted to shush him, but Phil had joined in. That piercing pitch echoed through our neighborhood. Everyone could hear it. I was sweating, visibly. My heart was racing. I had to get them to stop. I buckled over, pretending to cough heavily like I was choking. Phil and Jake stopped whistling and came to my aid. The night returned to silence as I caught my breath. I turned back, checking over my shoulder. The street was quiet, dark. There were so many shadows. As the wind picked up, it shook the trees, causing the casted light from the street lamps above them to jump and dance on the sidewalk. Leaves rushed up behind us, whipping past in a twirling mini tornado. I rushed us along faster, checking over my shoulder every few steps. I wanted us back in the safety of our home. The street was feeling more and more menacing. I could tell Phil was wondering what the hell was going on with me. Even Jake asked me to slow down. We got home, and I started to calm down. I helped Jake get ready for bed, but as he was putting on his pajamas, he started whistling again. The hairs on my neck stood up. Somehow, the sound that used to make me laugh was now terrifying me. I saw Jake's window open and rushed over to close it. Did I really think something would have heard his whistling? I was losing it. Get a grip. Jake asked if I was okay. I wasn't, but said I was. Then Phil came in for bedtime reading, as was our routine. Usually I'd take a bath and unwind, but my nerves were still jangled. I went through the house, turning on every light, checking every room, but they were all empty. Windows were closed, doors were locked. The house was safe. So why did I still have this terrible feeling like something else was in here? I passed back through the kitchen, turning the light off. But as I did, I caught something in the corner. It was a fast movement, but I was sure I saw it. I snapped the lights back on. The kitchen was bright and empty. I saw that movement, though, among the shadows. I knew I did. Didn't I? I rechecked the first floor with the lights on, but found nothing again. What the hell was I doing? I went back upstairs to catch the end of Phil's story. Jake was doing the sleep twitches, so I knew he was pretty much done for the night. Phil had some work to do, so I just went to my room to read. But really, I was watching the baby monitor. It was one of those night vision ones where your kid looks demonic. I had the book laid out though, so when Phil came in, I made it look like I was just finishing a chapter. He got into bed, kissed me, and asked me what was up. I told him about the courtyard. Well, I told him about the woman, not about the thing, the silhouette, whatever it was. But did I really see something? Maybe it was a trick of the light, some weird optical effect. I don't know. Phil said it was probably just the new neighborhood, but maybe not to go back to the courtyard, at least until the weekend when Phil could join. And with that, he fell back to his side of the bed and fell asleep. I stayed up, watching the monitor. Jake was quiet in bed. He slept calmly. Over the next few hours, I checked on him twice, in person, and he'd been sleeping peacefully both times. I was shaken awake by a nightmare shortly after 3 a.m. In it, I was back in the courtyard, chasing Jake around the pirate ship. I had dream legs, which is to say, I might as well have been running underwater. As I tried to gain, Jake kept getting further away. Then I realized he wasn't running from me. He was running from something behind me. I woke up in a sweat before I turned to face whatever it was. I instinctively checked the baby monitor. Jake wasn't in his crib. I shot out of bed and rushed into his room. He wasn't in here. The crib was empty, but his pajamas were laid out in his place, and the window was open a crack, but I knew I'd shut it. Where was Jake? I ran back to the hallway, and that's when I saw him. Jake was at the far end of the hall, standing on a chair in his diaper and leaning out the window. I screamed his name and rushed to him. I pulled him off the chair and we collapsed on the ground. I was crying and heard Phil come out to investigate. Jake was scared and confused. He couldn't form sentences and wasn't sure why he left his crib or stripped down. I brought him into our bed for the night. I'd never been more scared for Jake, but couldn't explain why. Visions of what I saw at the courtyard and the walk home kept flooding my memory, even though they didn't make sense. Then, as Jake was drifting off, he said something that chilled me through my bones. I didn't like that boy from the park today. I asked him, what boy? Phil shifted, directing his ear towards us, listening. Jake whispered back, the boy you can see through. I froze up. I couldn't speak. So there was someone there. I wanted to ask Jake a dozen questions, but I couldn't get any out. He was falling asleep anyways. That would just keep him up. And Phil, who was working in the morning and was already annoyed with me. I'd ask Jake after breakfast. I didn't think I'd ever fall back asleep, but eventually I did. Phil's alarm woke us up. I rolled over to Jake, but he was gone. My hand instinctively reached for the baby monitor. The battery was dead. There was that feeling again. Something was wrong. I rushed to Jake's room, but again, it was empty. So was the hallway and the bathroom. Maybe he was in the kitchen. I rushed to the stairs, but froze in my tracks. Jake was in a heap at the bottom. His arms and legs were bent in disturbing ways, as was his neck. He'd fallen down the stairs. I rushed down to him, screaming, the deepest sorrow inside me now burning out uncontrollably. At the bottom of the stairs, I scooped Jake up. Phil was at my side a second later. There was no question Jake was dead, but Phil rushed off to call an ambulance anyways. I held my only child in my arms and bawled. How had this happened? Something caught my attention. My eyes drifted up the stairs. There was something on the second floor looking down at us. It was that same silhouette I saw on the ship and the walk back. It had followed us home. Then it was gone. The staircase was empty, and it was just Jake and I again. I was inconsolable for a week. It was ruled an accident, but I couldn't believe that. I couldn't speak. I just cried. I cried with people and by myself. The next month was a blur. We pushed the wake and funeral by several weeks. We just weren't ready. I wasn't ready. I spend most of my days in bed now. I'm on a few medications and vodka. Lots of vodka. It all helps with the sleep. I just want to sleep all the time now. But this morning, that changed. I was laying in bed and thought back to the last picture I took of Jake. I checked my cell, and there it was. Him steering the ship proudly. Down the path, the woman, looking inwards at us from the street. The photo cut off the second half of the ship, so I couldn't see if the silhouette was there. I zoomed in on Jake's face and stared at it for the next half hour. That afternoon, I decided to go outside, go for a walk, get some air, just get off my pillow for a bit. I didn't have anywhere in mind, just to let my feet take me where they went. I started thinking about all the walks Jake and I used to go on, how adventurous he was, excitable, whistling the whole way. I wondered if I'd ever be able to go on a walk again and not think about him. Before I knew it, my feet had taken me through the neighborhood, the ravine, and now I was standing just outside the courtyard. I looked down the path and in. There was a mom there, sitting on one of the benches, watching her son and daughter playing on the pirate ship. They looked to be around Jake's age, maybe a bit older. I'm not sure why, but I turned in towards the courtyard and decided to sit and watch the kids play for a few minutes. I sat on a bench on the opposite side of the structure as the mother. For the briefest of time, I forgot about Jake. I started smiling while watching the kids play. It was fun. They were fun. Then Jake flooded my thoughts and my smile turned. I could feel the tears welling up and I wanted to leave now. I got up, turned to go, but gave the kids one more look. That's when I saw it again. The weird silhouette that looked like a walking shadow. The same one from the staircase. And here it was, now after a new kid. This time, a little girl. The mother was blissfully unaware, scrolling her cell phone. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. Again. It didn't matter. The brother's voice didn't fail him. He let out a blood-curdling screech. He'd seen the silhouette move towards his sister. The little girl turned and screamed, too. The mother, forced to pay attention now, rushed up the structure to her kids, both of which were now crying and upset. The mother tried to console them, but there was no use. They were both in full-blown meltdowns. She packed them up and smiled nervously at me as they passed. I'm sure I looked a mess. Now, it was just me in the courtyard. It felt so lonely here. It felt lonely because it shouldn't. This place should be filled with kids. Then, under the wind, I heard it, coming from the play structure. Those two notes formed into a whistle that resembled a tea kettle. Jake's whistle. I turned to the pirate ship and saw them. Dozens of silhouettes, the same size, child size, looking down at me. Then they began to disappear, just evaporating into thin air. All but one remained. The whistling came from it. Then it disappeared, and the whistling did too. that concludes episode 8 of 10 Minute Horror. We hope you enjoyed the TOT LOT, and we'll see you back here next Friday night for a brand new one. Stay safe.